So right here in this book, it says here in the preface, the Securities Exchange Commission has indicated that it intends to pursue a dual objective of upholding high-quality financial reporting domestically while encouraging convergence toward a high-quality global financing reporting framework. To this end, at the present time, there is an effort underway to harmonize Financial Accounting Standards Board and International Accounting Standards Board standards, IASB. In addition, there is a significant global movement toward acceptance of international accounting standards. This is evidenced by the European Union's decision that member countries should convert to IASB standards by 2005. And goes on in another area here to talk about how these standards are specifically to be implemented no later than 2005. This includes companies in the United Kingdom. This was decided on in June of 2002. So that means between June of 2002 and the end of 2005, they already knew. That means everybody already knew. Now, this is a big deal, especially if you're in a country that might be seeking to enter the European Union. And part of your eligibility for the European Union or your determination about working with the European Union has to do with your arrangements with the United States. Now, the thing is, definitions of reserves regarding the US GAAP, generally accepted accounting principles, is different than the UK GAAP, just when it comes to determining what reserves are, including proved reserves, proved developed reserves, or proved undeveloped reserves. Why? Because there's more specificity required by the UK GAAP, including the difference between proven and probable oil and gas reserves, and determinations of development. And it also talks about commercially producible. Now, this is different. In the United Kingdom standards, there is a specific identification of the consideration of commercially producible, which is different than the United States. That you do not have to have the same determinations of it being commercially producible under the American standards as the GAAP standards. So, for instance, if you look at or you listen to my review of the OCC report that was requested by Senator John Glenn regarding uranium enrichment facilities and the role of the Department of Energy, including the concerns that what was being revealed in that OCC report from the 1980s, if I'm not mistaken, it was 1981, specific to the consideration of how it was that what was being identified in the Department of Energy assessment or the assessment of the Department of Energy was that they were risking being lax in maintaining standards when it came to uranium enrichment facilities because they were leveraging things at uranium enrichment facilities for other kinds of energy production arrangements, including ones that were dependent on or that engaged in use of derivatives, and how that's factored into the last 30 to 40 years of the use of workers' compensation claims to cap liability domestically, while in addition to other factors, there has been an increase in capacity for insurance payouts based upon facilities damage in accordance with alleged acts of terrorism internationally. Then I think there's a very compelling argument about why would somebody obscure and try to interfere with information regarding changes that were going on in the United States that were different and distinct from changes that were going on in the United Kingdom, including and especially insofar as the UK standards are the ones the European Union used when it was discussing production arrangements. The other thing it talks about is when you're doing a production arrangement with a company in the United States versus a company in another country, that there are different considerations of things called a risk service agreement. The United States had different standards regarding risk service agreements than other countries do, pretty much every other country. But more than that, there's also the consideration of production sharing contracts and the manners in which those factor into consideration of what's called entitlements, and how in a agreement with a foreign company, a consideration of a entitlement agreement with the state is significantly different than the kind of agreement for production the United States allows to be made when it comes to gas and oil production, i.e., the United States does not have the same requirements regarding the entitlement payouts on royalties to the state that other countries do, including countries with national production companies. Most other countries include minerals as the property of the state, as opposed to where in the United States, mineral interests are the property of private persons. This also includes private persons that attempt to use nonprofit designations when it comes to arrangements they have around mineral interest, right? So these changes, specifically in regards to updates that were going to be considered in the onset of a production arrangement concerning what was understood to be a proved reserve versus a proved developed reserve or a proved undeveloped reserve. And what do these things mean? Well, it means when you're making the arrangement, you have a certain understanding of what the minerals are and what the potential for their development is. So what you are aspiring to develop them for or into is going to be a determinant of how you characterize the minerals at the onset. Additionally, the way you characterize the minerals at the onset is going to have a determination on whether or not you are able to engage a production arrangement based upon your capacity to prove and the capacity to determine whether or not it's developed. And so this is why the consideration of what a reserve is and how you characterize the reserve is important as well.